What if Nedd refused Hand of the King Part 2? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. In the small council chambers, council members both old and new gather for the first time since the Lannister Rebellion, as it is now called. They look at one another, then at the king, who sits silently, taking a deep breath and glancing over.
I'm sure many of you are wondering what happened. That is a long story, but one that has changed the fate of the realm. My hand shall fill you in.
As you know, Robert initially came to me some months ago, offering me the title of Hand of the King. I had refused him at first, believing my place was in Winterfell. That was until an assassin tried to kill my youngest son. I brought the dagger to Robert, as I thought he might know who was responsible. As it turns out, the one who hired this catspaw was none other than Joffrey Baratheon.
A gasp escapes from the small council members, who look at one another. They question how that could be, but Robert shakes his head.
Are you surprised? Those of you new here might not know it, but many who served with me for any amount of time know that my son is a monster. 7 L's. I may not even have to call him my son anymore. He is a bastard born of incest between my queen and her brother, Jaime Lannister.
A few of them mutter darkly amongst themselves, talking about how troubling news this is, and whispering words of warning at how such things are cursed by the gods. Nedd hears this and nods his head.
Aye, and it seems the gods have had their justice. After the truth about the dagger was exposed, King Robert wished to send Joffrey to the wall as punishment, but the Queen attempted a coup. She tried to have the king declared insane and Joffrey put in his place. However, we stopped them in the Riverlands.
That was a right proper battle. Now the Queen is dead, and her paramour is in chains in Riverrun. All that remains is hunting Lord Tywin down, and that little monster Joffrey.
And Renly.
Aye, and Renly. That fool. I would have given him power. What could he have been planning? Damn it, his time will come. He's fled across the narrow sea, but Lord Tywin is here, and we should deal with him as soon as possible. So long as he and Joffrey live, I cannot sit easy on my throne.
Together, the small council begins to create a strategy to finish off Lord Tywin. After his defeat in the Riverlands, the Old Lion took most of his forces west back to the Westerlands, save for a few raiding parties meant to cause chaos and cover their retreat. He begins fortifying the Golden Tooth to prevent an invasion of the West while ordering Sir Stafford Lannister to begin gathering new levies. This puts them in a position to fight a defensive war. However, in the south, they glance nervously at the Tyrells, who have an army mobilized, but they make no move to challenge him or march out. The initial assaults on the Golden Tooth prove disastrous for the royal host. Despite their diminished numbers, the Lannisters' defenses are formidable, and the towering fortress is perched in a natural choke point. This turns the pass into a killing field that results in heavy losses during each assault. Robb already launched 3 attacks, but none managed to crack the defenses. Their siege engines are also useless as they cannot be fired at a safe range. Instead, he reluctantly pulls back to rethink his strategy. Robert is not pleased with this idea as he paces his tent and urges his men to attack again. Unfortunately, this is exactly what Tywin wants, as he can easily resupply his army, but his raiders ensure that forage and supplies are difficult to come by in the Riverlands. While he waits, Robert begins to train and work in restoring his original physique. He has men spar with him, and while his technique remains as perfect as ever, his vast strength has diminished as he finds himself tiring easily. Soon men begin to desert, and some lords wish to return home and deal with the raiders. They hope that the Tyrells will attack from the south where the hills are less fortified, but the rumored attack does not come. Instead, a raven arrives to offer terms to Robert. They promise to march on the Westerlands, but only if Robert consents to a marriage with Margaery. For Robert, this is a serious insult, as he has no wish to marry. More importantly, he is not in the mood to bargain for his vengeance. He spends several days raging and cursing as he waits for Robb and Nedd to think of a new plan to capture the Golden Tooth. Unfortunately, the siege drags on. Robert begins to seriously consider the proposal. more of his troops begin to depart, and Tywin strengthens his position. Although he hates the idea, he thinks of the benefits and begins to consider his options. However, before he can accept it, Grey Wind discovers a pass through the Golden Tooth. It is a simple ox path, but it is large enough to sneak a force of men through. While Nedd thinks it's too risky, Robert is eager to try anything and agrees to the plan. That night, Robb Stark leads a contingent of royal army through the narrow paths of the Oxcross. Robert rides with them, gripping his hammer tightly as Grey Wind rides ahead. Moving swiftly and silently, they bypass the Golden Tooth and descend upon the Lannister supply trains, setting fire to wagons and cutting down the guards. Robert himself is astride his warhorse, smashing through men with his hammer, though he must be protected by Sir Barristan to cover his weakness. The sight of the king and Barristan the Bold sends men into a panic. Many throw their weapons down and disappear into the woods and hills. As the army hurries to deal with this crisis, Nedd orders a direct assault. With their forces distracted and divided, they are met with far less resistance. Caught between two armies, the Lannister forces are routed. The Old Lion himself is forced to retreat to Castle Rock, abandoning the Golden Tooth and leaving the road to the Westerlands wide open. Lord Lefford and Sir Stafford are both captured, allowing the royal army free passage into the Westerlands. The royal army pours into the Westerlands, taking castles and repaying the chaos they caused in the Riverlands in kind. Although many wish to take their anger out on the villages and small folk, Robert is careful to restrain them. Wanton pillaging and rapes are punished swiftly, helping win over the people. Here, Robert's charisma shines through as he rides ahead of his column, waving at the people and greeting them. He smiles and mingles with nobles. The effect is seen right away as houses sworn to the Lannisters begin surrendering en masse. Desperate to regain favor, the Tyrells finally mobilize their army, marching towards the Reach Westerlands border. But their timing is too late. The royal host has already secured decisive victories, and Robert no longer requires their aid. When a delegation from Highgarden arrives to renew their offer of Marjorie's hand, Robert dismisses them. The final blow to the Lannisters comes at the gates of Castle Rock. Robert's army lays siege to the great fortress, cutting off all supply lines. Tywin, out of options and allies, sends envoys to negotiate terms. Robert, however, refuses to grant leniency. After weeks of bombardment, the gates of Castle Rock are breached. The royal army storms the castle, and Tywin Lannister is captured. The Old Lion is brought before Robert in chains. He soon loses his head, while Joffrey is sent to the wall. With the Lannisters defeated and the Westerlands brought to heel, the war comes to a close. Unfortunately, while this happened, there is little sign of Renly, who seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth. Although Robert offers a reward for his capture, no one can bring any information. Renly Baratheon chooses Volantis as his refuge, a city vast and chaotic enough to let him blend in while he tries to rebuild his army. He takes what few supporters he has met with influential magisters, wealthy merchants, and respected sellsword captains to try and negotiate for alliances. These are met with middling success, as most officials are not interested in supporting him. All he manages to gather is a few lesser sellsword companies, and this costs him heavily. With the realm at peace and under the undisputed leadership of Robert, it is much harder to sell people on an invasion effort, as they will face heavy resistance. But as he finishes a feudal meeting with an influential spice merchant in a town a few leagues from the city, the bell tower begins to ring. He looks up sharply, the sound growing louder. Guards rush past him, hurrying to the docks as people run in the opposite direction, some pointing to the sea. And from the mist, a silhouette emerges from the darkness, a ship unlike any other. The silence. Renly feels his stomach drop. He's heard the stories of Euron Greyjoy, the Crow's Eye, a man who leaves ruin in his wake wherever he sails. The chaos spreads to the water, and ships desperately try to escape the coming carnage. All this does is flood the harbor, choking it with ships, and the few war galleys there are unable to maneuver as silence slips through their line. The experienced Ironborn sailors dodge the ships and rush into the harbor, armed with axes, curved blades, and wicked grins. Renly throws on his sword belt and rushes to the inn where he is staying. The innkeeper shouts at everyone to flee, but there's no time. The clang of iron on iron echoes through the building as the first wave of raiders crash through the front doors. Renly draws his sword and rushes to the first raider. He parries his attack and cuts the man across the chest. He dodges the next attacker's swing and stabs him in the stomach. The first lunges at him, a jagged blade swinging in a wide arc. Renly parries, the force of the blow jarring his arm. He twists his blade, cutting across the man's chest. The streets outside are a nightmare. Euron's crew has turned the bustling harbor district into a slaughterhouse. Merchants and sailors are cut down while the few defenders are overrun. He needs to escape, but the docks are already aflame, cutting off his route to any remaining ships. A harsh laugh rings out behind them. Before Renly can react, he feels a sharp blow to his back. He stumbles, his sword slipping from his grasp as two men grab his arms, dragging him toward the docks. He struggles, kicking and twisting, but they hold him firm. The last thing he sees before darkness takes him is the blood-red sails of the Silence looming overhead. The disappearance of Renly does not seem to change things too much for the next few months. The realm remains at peace as Robert secures his hold, though his eyes are never far away from the east or searching for Renly. Meanwhile, in the east, a new star is rising as Daenerys continues her campaign in Slaver's Bay, carving a small kingdom for herself. Although it remains a powerful empire on paper, her grip is far weaker than many believe. Soon enough, she has a rebellion brewing at her back door as the slave owners of the region rise up in rebellion, intent on overthrowing her and restoring their way of life. In this case, her dragons prove just as big a liability as an asset as they begin to grow restless and aggressive. This leaves her struggling to maintain the peace between the freedmen and the old families. It is only her name and reputation that keep her in power. However, with her dragons growing more restless, she is forced to place them in captivity to prevent them from causing unnecessary harm. But this also emboldens her enemies who rise in rebellion. Soon, her capital of Meereen is under siege after an incident in the fighting pits forces Daenerys to fly off on Drogon. Without their queen, her remaining advisors try to organize the defenses while the remaining dragons run wild. It is in this chaos that Euron sees an opportunity to strike. Silence approaches Slaver's Bay, dodging the patrols of Yunka's ships and raiding supply lines as they make their way into the city. Even the blockade is not enough to stop the experienced sailors of the Ironborn who slip through the dead of night and enter the harbor. Meereen is a city of turmoil by the time he arrives. Half the city is on fire, and the other half is sick with the pale mare. With Daenerys gone, flown away on Drogon after the chaos in the fighting pits, her advisors struggle to hold the fragile remnants of her rule together. Though unsullied freedmen march the streets, they do so at their peril, as the sons of the Harpy ambush them in the streets. But this is just the most open way in which the freedmen and the old families are at each other's throats. The Yunkai siege tightening brings new skirmishes, food shortages, and despair. The tension in the Great Pyramid is palpable as Daenerys' inner circle meets to discuss their increasingly desperate situation. Grey Worm stands by the table, accompanied by the sellsword captains, Dothraki blood riders, Missandei, and the other freedmen along with Hizdahr zo Loraq. Debates rage into the night as they discuss how to break the siege, as they know they cannot stay on the defensive, lest the city consume itself. But as the debate reaches its boiling point, the chamber doors swing open, and Euron Greyjoy steps inside, swaggering into the room, accompanied by several Ironborn warriors.
Who invited this pirate into our city?
Hizdahr motions for his brazen beasts to apprehend them, but Euron gestures for them to stand down.
Peace, peace. I come bearing gifts, and perhaps a solution to your troubles. You dare enter the Great Pyramid uninvited. Uninvited, yes, but unwelcome. That remains to be seen. Seems you have plenty of uninvited guests. Allow me to help you deal with them. I hear your queen has taken flight and left you here to defend her city. You're surrounded, starving, and leaderless. Yet I am here, ready to offer my strength. You bring one ship. What strength do you have to bring? And what payment do you wish for this service? I am no sellsword. I care little for gold. I want a far greater prize. The dragons.
The room erupts into chaos. Grey Worm slams his spear against the ground, and Rakaro draws his arak.
You dare speak of taking the Queen's dragons? You will die for such insolence.
Euron doesn't flinch, his gaze fixed on Grey Worm and Rakaro, as if daring them to strike.
Calm yourselves, little soldiers. I don't mean to take them. I mean to control them and turn them upon your foes. You see, dragons are not just beasts. They need a master. And it seems your queen is indisposed.
You think of us as fools? If anyone could have mounted a dragon, we would have found riders long ago. Take this madman away.
Then you have nothing to lose by letting me try. Your enemies grow bolder with each passing day. The Yunkish choke you, and your people are on the verge of rebellion. Give me a chance, and I will unleash the dragons upon your foes. If I fail, what do you lose?
You say you can control the dragons. How?
Euron reaches into his belt and produces a strange, curved horn, etched with Valyrian glyphs and adorned with bands of blackened steel.
This dragon binder, forged in the shadow of Valyria itself. When it is sounded, no dragon can resist its call.
The Queen has entrusted us with the safety of her dragons. They are her children. This is a betrayal of her trust.
And our Queen has promised to protect us. But she's gone. If we do nothing, the dragons in this city will be destroyed.
A vote is called, and though Grey Worm and the Dothraki refuse, most of the freedmen and Shave-Pates agree to this plan. Reluctantly, the group agrees to take Euron to Rhaegal, the green dragon who has made his lair atop one of the pyramids. They do not dare go inside, but a gaping hole in its side provides all the entrance Euron needs as the winds brush through. Rhaegal watches them with narrowed eyes as they approach. He growls, smoke curling from his nostrils. Euron steps forward, unbothered by the dragon's menacing display. One of his men raises the horn to his lips and blows. The sound is unearthly, a deep, resonant wail that seems to shake the very air around them. Rhaegal roars, rearing up on his hind legs, but then something shifts. The dragon's movements slow, his growls subside, and his massive head turns to Euron. Beside him, the man who blew the horn clutches his throat. He gasps and starts to shake, dropping to one knee before falling dead. Euron casually steps over his body and approaches. The Ironborn captain steps closer, his grin triumphant, placing a hand on Rhaegal's scaly snout.
Good boy.
Before anyone can stop him, Euron climbs onto Rhaegal's back. With a triumphant roar, the dragon spreads his wings and leaps into the sky, circling the city in a display of raw power. The people of Meereen stare upward in awe and terror as the green dragon flies above them, a man atop its back. The next day dawns with a crimson sky as the Yunkish prepare for another assault. Slavers laugh in their pavilions as their men arm themselves, while Jaskari troops get into formation, preparing catapults and siege engines. To them, this will be no different than any other day, but suddenly, their laughter turns into screams as the camp's outskirts go up in flames. Rhaegal appears over the wall and unleashes a burst of fire, raining it down on the siege lines. Slavers and soldiers rush to and fro, trying to react to this attack. The lockstep legions hurriedly get into formation, trying to rally their troops and organize a counterattack. Arrows and ballista fire in the air, but nothing lands as Rhaegal circles around and then sweeps for another attack. He unleashes a torrent of fire upon the helpless soldiers below, reducing their war engines, tents, and supplies to smoldering ruins. Men flee in terror, their cries lost amidst the roar of dragonfire and the thunderous beats of Rhaegal's wings. Euron laughs and cuts a line of destruction through the camp. He targets the large pavilions put up by slavers and burns them to cinders. The wise masters do not have time to react as their tents go up in flames, leaving the army leaderless and desperate. As their morale shatters, the gates of Meereen burst open. The Unsullied, led by Grey Worm, pour out in disciplined ranks, cutting down the disorganized remnants of the Yunkish army. The freedmen, inspired by the sight of their dragon savior, take up arms and join the fray while the Dothraki and sellswords circle the camp, mercilessly cutting down those retreating. By nightfall, the siege is broken. The Yunkish forces lie in ruins, their survivors retreating into the desert, leaving behind only ashes and the echoes of their screams. The people of Meereen erupt in celebration, chanting Euron's name in gratitude. Within the Great Pyramid, however, the mood is far from celebratory. The tension among Daenerys' advisors is palpable. Grey Worm stands rigid, his expression grim as he watches Euron stride into the council chamber, his air of triumph as unshakable as ever. Rakaro glares daggers at the Ironborn captain, his hand twitching near the hilt of his Arak. Missandei, standing at the edge of the room, looks uneasy, her lips pressed into a thin line. Skahaz Mokandak, however, leans back in his chair with a satisfied smirk, clearly pleased with the outcome. Though they are grateful with their victory, they dislike Euron's presence.
I've kept my promise. Your city is saved. The Yunkish have been reduced to nothing but ash and corpses. You're welcome.
You have done what was needed, but the dragons are not yours to command. They belong to our queen.
Your queen wasn't here to protect her people. Someone had to step up. You should be thanking me, soldier, not growling like a dog.
Days later, the city is still recovering from the siege. The freedmen work tirelessly to rebuild, while the stench of charred flesh still lingers in the air. Euron takes no part in this, simply takes the chance to loot the remnants of the Yunkish army. That is until another shape appears in the distance. Drogon, his massive wings casting a dark silhouette against the sun, even larger than Rhaegal. On his back is Daenerys, her silver hair streaming in the wind, her expression grim but slowly turning into surprise when she sees the Yunkish are gone. She lands in the Great Pyramid's courtyard, where she is greeted by her advisors. Their joy at her return is overshadowed by their unease. Daenerys' eyes widen as she spots Rhaegal perched on one of the pyramids, his green scales gleaming unnaturally in the sunlight. The dragon looks down at her with an unsettling intensity, his growls low and guttural.
What has happened here? Why is Rhaegal like this?
Before anyone can answer, Euron strides into the courtyard, his swagger unchanged.
The Dragon Queen returns at last. Your dragon has taken quite a liking to me.
You enslaved my dragon.
No. I saved your city. I allowed your dragons to help your people after you abandoned them. I am the only reason this city still stands. Me and your dragon. Or should I say, my dragon.
How dare you?
If you want him, then take him back.
Daenerys calls for Rhaegal, but the green dragon roars, the sound shaking the very stones of the pyramid, and for a moment, Daenerys falters. When she reaches out to him with a soft, coaxing voice, he snarls and lets loose a burst of flame in her direction. Drogon leaps to shield her, his massive body taking the brunt of the fire. He roars back in fury, the courtyard trembling as the two dragons prepare to clash.
Stop this madness. I will not let you do this to my children.
Your children? You abandoned them. Rhaegal is mine now, Queen. Let me show you why.
Suddenly, he leaps onto his back as the dragon takes to the sky. Cursing, Daenerys takes her own dragon and flies after him. The sky above Meereen becomes a battlefield. Drogon and Rhaegal circle each other, roaring and snapping as their shadows briefly become one and cover the sun. Daenerys clings to Drogon's back, urging him to fight as he unleashes a burst of fire all around them. It forces Rhaegal to fly low to avoid the attack, but as Drogon tires, he shoots up and smashes into Drogon, knocking him off balance. Daenerys tries to call back Rhaegal as Drogon's claws rake his chest. The blow sends Rhaegal stumbling, but Euron directs him to bank away from the follow-up slash. Instead, the dragon circles and bites into Drogon's wing. He keeps his grip on the larger dragon and uses his momentum to throw him aside. As Drogon spins out of control, Rhaegal unleashes a burst of fire onto his belly and then slams him, biting into his neck before pushing him back into the earth. Miraculously, Daenerys is unharmed, but she squirms out from Drogon's wounded form. Euron hovers above her.
Go back to Westeros if you wish, but if you do, you'll find no throne waiting for you. Only fire and blood.
With that, Euron pulls Rhaegal away, the green dragon's wings beating powerfully as they ascend into the sky. With a final mocking salute to Daenerys, he flies off as silence sails after him, leaving Meereen in stunned silence. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.